There he is. I just barely twitched it that time. Did you see that? I just made that real slow little twitch and he just run the slack out of the line. And that's the thing about this bait, you know, you can work it a lot of different ways. You can really jerk it hard, you can barely twitch it, but that bait's got such an action. That's a nice fish right there on the shadow wrap. Come here, big boy. Let me get my hands on you. I just barely gave him that twitch. And that bait swapped sides, and look what I caught. Normally I like to throw a jerkbait, you know, in the early spring and pre-spawn. It can also be good right around the spawn. You know, it can be deadly, especially over the tops of beds and things like that. You know, and another time I like it again is in the fall. But, you know, anytime you're faced with that, you know, cold weather where you're starting to get a lot of shad die off, those shad are really struggling, starting to die off from the colder weather, that's a great time. But like I said, a jerkbait's a good bait anytime you're faced with, especially smallmouth. Any lake in the country that you have smallmouth, you know, smallmouth just love a jerkbait. You know, largemouth are very acceptable to them, especially around the spawn and pre-spawn and even post-spawn a lot of times when they're garden fry, things of that nature. So that's probably some of my favorite times to fish a jerkbait. You know, I've kind of been working this bait today just kind of with a jerk, pause cadence. And I've only been letting it set, you know, 2 to 3 seconds and really jerking the bait with a lot of slack in the line. You know, that's one thing about this bait. I don't think there's really a wrong way. There's one right there. I don't think there's really a wrong way to fish it. You know, I just let that bait right there, it just set 2 to 3 seconds and I saw that fish hit it and he just kind of run the slack out of the line. You know, it's got such that erratic, wide action that especially these fish they just can't stand it. It's just sitting there in their face, it's darting back and forth, it's turning, it's rotating. I think it'll do two things. I think of course it's going to catch those aggressive fish, but those fish that are really kind of unaggressive, they just can't stand that. They just can't resist that action. What I've been kind of fishing this bait on today is, you know, I've kind of been looking for these main lake points and banks, wherever there's a channel swing, wherever there's a little deep water coming up next to it, and looking for these areas where there's little transitions of rock, where if you kind of look back down this bank, it goes from bigger to smaller rock, and you've got some bigger chunk rock and limestone and things of that nature mixed in. But I've kind of been fishing this bait on, like I said, rock changes and channel swings, either just inside the creeks or out on the main lake, and that's where these fish are set up. You know, this water's pretty cold out here today. It's about 43, 44 degrees, and these fish are set up on these steeper 45-degree rock banks wherever that channel touches or just swings away from the bank. This is a Team Lou's 6'8". It's a medium light action rod. It's got a real soft tip, and that's one thing about jerkbaits. You know, I can see this has got a real flimsy tip, but yet it gets into backbone, and what that does, that helps me move that bait. I'm able to jerk that bait pretty hard, but the tip takes up a lot of that, so I don't really move the bait very far. And I've got it on a Lou's tournament light reel, and I've got it paired up today with a 8 and a 10-pound Suffix Pro Mix line. And this bait is weighted so perfectly that I kind of like that mono, because this bait just very slowly sinks on this line. What this does, this also gives me a little bit more stretch, and I think that helps me a lot of times. That mono helps me whenever I'm hooked those fish and they're pulling real hard. I'm able to use the rod and the mono to kind of take up some of that shock, and it kind of helps me fight those fish. Another one on the shadow wrap.